Um, there we go. So what do you all imagine that can mean? If we're talking about visual storytelling and specifically the comics medium, what does that usually mean? What are the ingredients of a comics page? Oh, there's a question. Background and character. Okay, there we go. Characters and backgrounds. And definitely, yeah, that is going to be an ingredient in the majority of panels that one could draw, right? There's usually going to be somebody and also a somewhere for them to be, whatever that somewhere consists of. Composition. Okay, wow, you guys are getting right to the meat of things. Composition. Yeah, and as we mentioned before, composition is huge in all of art, but in the comic book page, it takes on another role because in a standard standalone image or illustration, you're usually only talking about what's happening within the frame. Whereas on a comic book page, you have multiple frames. And so there's this additional element that creeps in, which is the question of how the eye flow works. And oh, the size of frames, sure. Constantly making little choices related to that whenever I draw a page. There's always that sort of question of like, how much real estate do I have to work with on this page? And sometimes I will tell students that the process of doing layout on a page is very much one of deciding how much space is going to be devoted to what. And sometimes you end up having little negotiations with yourself to say, okay, I'll give you this little bit more space with this panel, but you have to do something different with this panel. Does it have a main or focus? So I would say that's an interesting question because in any given single panel, you probably are going to have some kind of focal point that the eye is meant to go towards. And you might even have certain elements uh, in the background that might be designed to, like, say, draw the eye towards your figure or your subject matter, which could be any number of things. So compositional elements and how they relate to the focus, I think, is very relevant. But also when you get into the layout of the whole page, I mean, there might be some pages, for instance, that have a really big panel that's meant to take up a lot more visual focus than the others, or there might be specific ways that the focus in each panel controls the eye flow. So that could come into play in a number of different ways. So yeah, definitely, I would say that is an ingredient. Any other thoughts on what goes into a comics page or a scene or a graphic novel in terms of the storytelling? I mean, that's a pretty good list already. Characters, perspective. There we go. Yes. Um, so, and this is one of the things we teach at the school. You know, when you're building environments, having some kind of baseline understanding of the rules of perspective can be really useful, just in terms of adding a third dimension, you know, to what you're doing to keep everything from getting too flat. Whoops, I didn't do that. We're getting to know this particular set of drawing tools. Um, and in fact, that can come into play in a couple of different ways, because I'll often say the minute you start putting a background in that's in perspective, perspective has a tendency to create a lot of diagonal lines as a byproduct of how it works. And diagonal lines have a different kind of compositional energy to them. So not only is that relevant to creating an environment that feels real and immersive, but it can also have ramifications in terms of how the eye leading and how the dynamic energy of the panel works compositionally. So it operates on a couple of different levels there. Any other thoughts? Again, this is a pretty good list already. Actually, I will add something in here, and it's an aspect of composition, since I already kind of mentioned it tangentially. Leading lines, which is one of the things that gets talked about in design and composition classes. Again, the question of how does the placement of a bunch of different things in a panel potentially cause the eye to want to follow certain patterns, and how does that, or other choices that you might make, lead to certain kinds of eye movement. And I tend to think that like controlling eye movement on the page is a huge part of how the comic layout works, because you're manipulating the reader's brain into reading it the way that you want it to. Color and palettes, yeah, definitely. When you have color on the page, that is another compositional element. You are basically, I mean, everything we do on the page is basically a form of, what do you want to call it? Hypnotism, manipulation. It's for the purpose of storytelling, but you're trying to immerse people in a story, and you're also trying to like control the impact it has and how they react to what they're seeing. Because that is kind of the essence of storytelling. Storytelling is a subtle form of manipulation. You, in the sense that you're trying to make people feel something they weren't feeling before, or you're trying to trick people into feeling like they just watched a bunch of moving pictures, even though technically none of these pictures on the page move. So it's an optical illusion. It's a bit of brain trickery to get someone to look at, hang on, I got a visual here, to look at a sequence of panels that are not moving, and yet you get the sense that a bunch of movement and storytelling has happened. And a lot of that has to do with this principle called closure, where the brain wants to find patterns in things. It will see something that's incomplete and try to complete it. So if you show them partial views of something, it'll fill in the rest. If you show different camera angles on something, it will assume that we are in an immersive environment and there's a moving camera. And if you put a couple of things next to each other, the brain will sort of complete that. So one of my favorite examples to show in class is there's a much better panel sequence drawn by another artist. This is just my scribbled version of it, where when a character goes to answer a door in a comic, usually it's what you have is you have a picture of someone turning to face a door, and there's knock, knock, knock. And then the next panel is them standing there with the door open saying hello, and there's another person standing there. And people just read that as, oh, he walked over to the door, he opened it, and now this person has walked in. But did we see any of that happen? No, we didn't. But the brain wants to fill in the blank. So your reader basically comes there with you and says, yeah, I saw all of that, even though you didn't. So what I also mean when I say that comics is a little bit of a subtractive medium. Unlike animation, where you see every single frame, in comics, you're being selectively shown a handful of keyframes that are meant to imply what happened in between. And that's where we get into talking about the magic that happens in the gutter between the panels, all the stuff that we don't see except in our mind's eye. It's a bit of a tangent from the last thing somebody posted, but anyway. So yeah, all of these things come together. That's a pretty good list, I think. So let's move on. So one of the things we're going to do in this workshop for fun is we're going to look at coming up with our own story. And with that, we're going to use that as a kind of way to explore how the layout process works once we have a story that we want to represent. By the way, full disclosure, I have never run this workshop in a 2-hour format before. I've only ever run it in a 1-hour format. So the good news is we have a lot more room to meander and to go off on tangents if anyone raises any interesting questions. We have a lot of space to operate here. It also means that I am modifying my map as I go along. So normally for this exercise, I usually say, let's only do a 3-page story because we're not going to have time to do more than that. I'm now leaving it open that we could go past 3 pages, but we'll see how far we get because this is slightly unexplored territory for me. So it'll be an adventure for all of us. So like generally speaking, if you're looking at story, you're usually looking at a couple of different things. And there's a certain structure that story has, but before you even get to structure, there's basically 3 kinds of ingredients you need. You need to have some characters, you need to have a setting, and you need to have some kind of a conflict or a problem that the characters are trying to resolve. Because if you don't have a conflict or a problem, you have no story. It's that simple. And a conflict or a problem doesn't have to mean sword fighting. It doesn't have to mean I have to save the world. It could be something as simple as, Dad, can I borrow the car? No, you can't. It could be something, or hey, did you study for that exam or didn't you? Or somebody like goes for a walk and they fall down a hole and they have to get out again. Conflicts can be simple or complex. They can be big or they can be small. And as Kurt Vonnegut once said, every one of your characters has to want something, but it could just be a glass of water. So if we're looking at this in terms of just pure brainstorming, this is where we get to the bananas freeform part of stuff. Give me some ideas for characters that could be in a story. If we wanted to make a story right now, what kind of character would you want to see in that? No wrong answers. But generally, the crazier the answers get in this workshop, the happier I am. But let's see. Ooh, a director. Interesting. Okay. Wants to create the perfect movie. All right. What else? Any other thoughts? Oh, wow, we're actually quite logical and linear today. Usually I get a bunch of people who are yelling out a robot, a zombie, a duck, and then we have to put together a plot out of that. Um, okay, so we got a lead actor who's a little bit fresh off the bus to Hollywood. All right. This is looking promising here. Any other thoughts? Okay. Old lady who complains. About the Youngs. And a producer. This is so linear. A magical florist. Okay. Trying to rein in the director. I just came out wrong. And a magical florist. I'm gonna that in a different color just because it's magical. All right. Oh, hey, the old lady could be an actor. Okay, former actor. Or maybe she is still an actor. Okay, that's actually a good thought. Let me put that. Oh, interesting. We're already getting into relationships here, which is great. Okay, so we got an older actress, a veteran actress, and a lead actor who's like the newbie. Also, this actress trying to make a comeback, right? I think I saw that written further up there. Okay, so we got the comeback queen here, and we got the new young actor. And okay, I think this is a pretty good cast. And then we've got this magical florist as a chaotic element. We'll see what happens there. All right, so what's our setting? I feel like our setting wants to be a movie set, unless somebody has another thought. Mind you, a movie set could be a lot of things because that's the nature of movie sets. Hire the magical florist so she can impress the director to get the lead role. Interesting. I'm kind of tantalized by the question of what a magical florist actually is. Like, how is the florist magical? Is this basically just like a sort of like uh oh shoot, it's going out of my head. Um what's that movie? Supercalifragil. I can only get supercalifragilistic. I'm having a paper jam. Yeah, sort of I'm picturing almost a Mary Poppins kind of florist who just comes in and fixes situations. Create flowers from nothing. Okay, that's promising. All right, like a witch for hire, different bouquets or like different spells. Ooh, that could be interesting. Yeah, I like the idea of like floral themed magic. Um, let's let's stick a pin in that idea because I kind of like it. Now let's take a look at this movie set because what's fun about a movie set is that yeah, it could theoretically be on a lot in Hollywood or it could be on location. Um, but either way, what's fun about a movie set is that it can embody all these other locations because that's the role of a movie set, right? So what kind of movie are they filming if we're going with this idea? Oh wow, really going down the rabbit hole of this magic system now. I do like the idea of floral magic or herbal, something that's almost starting to sound a little bit druidic. I think I'm good with that. Okay, or it could be something as simple as herbalism that seems like magic. Let's circle back to that question when we start coming up with a plot, because I think then we'll know what's the best way for this magic florist to fit. Because I sometimes I will start with a vague idea of a character, and I'll try not to tile them down too much until I know what the scenario is, and then I can pick the version of that character that will best work for that situation, or that will bring the most drama or comedy or both out of that situation. Um, so right now, I want to hear about what is this movie? What's the movie they're filming, and therefore, what's the setting within the setting? Because we have because again, with the movie set, we have a setting within the setting, which is what kind of setting they're trying to reproduce in this film. Um, what's the setting of the film? Is it, for instance, modern day? Is it a period? Is it another planet? or they have a fight about, and the director wants to hear them both and create something in between. Period piece, something that requires flowers, sure, that makes sense. I feel like we're sort of like that feels like, I don't know, 16 to 1700s Europe or something like that, where like a bunch of like hoity-toity people with very tightly tailored suits are doing things. It's sort of a Renaissance period thing, or just pre-Renaissance. Oh, 1960s. Okay, that's another way. Okay. And then what kind of a physical location if we've got a time period? Where would we be? I mean, obviously, if you when you conjure up the 60s to someone in North America, it's hard not to picture the 60s in North America, or specifically in the USA, because that just seems like the archetypal setting for movies set in the 60s, you know. Um, well, what could this movie be about? Oh, the theater. Okay, flower shop for the florist. We think it's a small shop, but it's actually a big castle. Well, that's interesting. That almost invokes magic to me in another sense. It's like you walk into a small shop, but it's a castle. Like there's almost a Doctor Who TARDIS kind of principle there. Like the shop is bigger on the inside. Come into my shop. And we'll just go through. I've got some more flowers in the back, and you go into the back, and it's like bigger than the mall that the shop was in. That could be fun. Or, okay, alternate setting, 1980s, if the movie is going to take place in the 60s. That actually makes a certain amount of sense, because, if you look at periods of time where different nostalgias happen, like the 80s was definitely a time of like 60s nostalgia in film and TV, just like the 70s was all about 50s nostalgia. It's all about whichever generation just got old and got nostalgia about their younger years. Um, so I could totally see that. Yeah, so let's go. I like this idea. So it's an 80s movie set. Oh man, there's there's gonna be a lot of jerks on this movie set. Because it's the 80s. And that means, okay, so we're looking back on the 60s, nostalgically. What's happening in the 60s? What's this 60s movie about? We're gonna need some kind of a topic. Ideally, something that could be really fun to have as like as extra flavor while everyone is arguing about how to make this film. So getting back to our idea of our director that wants to make the perfect movie, what do they think the perfect movie would be about? What is the story that's burning within the chest of this director? Oh, this lady was a star in the 60s. Oh, so it's like a nostalgia thing, you know? Yeah. It's like, it's like they brought Angela Bassett back to be, in a film in the 80s or something like that. Yeah. Um, so we have like a someone who was a big starlet in the 60s. And although I think if that's the case, then maybe the lead actor wouldn't really be that for many generations behind them. That's only 20 years. That's a short period of time for them to go from a starlet to a grandparent. I mean, it's not impossible, but it might be more likely that the lead actor is their child rather than their grandchild. Just a thought. I don't know why I'm chronologically nitpicking this, but anyway. It's just a workshop. Stop thinking about it so hard, Greg. Um, let's see. Any other thoughts as to what this movie could be about? Is it drama? Is it a comedy? Is it like lighthearted? So she was 45 in the 60s. So not one of those hot young starlets in the 60s, but already someone who was like, man, I don't think you guys know how easily actresses could get aged out in earlier decades. You guys have grown up in the era of people like Tilda Swinton who just keep going. In the 60s, it was basically, oh, you're 35, you're out. Sexism was much more of a palpable thing. But sure, let's say movie about the 60s counterculture and the youthful optimism. Brilliant. That's totally a movie they would have made in the 80s. Yes, that's almost every movie they made in the 80s. Something lighthearted to contrast the I like that idea. Yes. The film is lighthearted. The cast of the film are not lighthearted because they're just at each other's throats behind the scenes. So okay. So counterculture, youthful optimism. Yeah, I think we could do that. I personally I love it when we go comedy on these workshops. It's so much easier. You don't have to think as hard. Well, you do have to think as hard, but in a different way. Um, yes, I could totally see this being a dark comedy. In fact, I find that most behind the scenes stories about theater or film tend to lend themselves well to dark comedy. Hmm. Yes. This florist could be, yeah, this florist could be very old. She could be just like another. I'm actually curious, does this florist, if the florist is a not entirely, I'm getting the sense that the florist is almost a magical being. Does this magical being look like a sweet old lady, or do they look eternally young? How do they present? You know, we don't have to give a, yeah, like we could just go with something that's like a fey creature, which means they can look like whatever they want to, depending on what it amuses them to look like. Um, well, you know what? Let's circle back to that once we get into the scenario because we might decide again that detail based on what we think is going to be the funniest. Okay, so I think we got a movie set and we got so here's my last question for setting for the period piece here, and I'm gonna throw out two possible abilities. You can tell me which one you like better. For the 60s counterculture, an urban setting for the movie, or just because this was a thing in the 60s, the beach. I think that was actually more of a thing in 60s movies as opposed to 80s movies about the 60s. I mean, there were also just an awful lot of movies about the Vietnam War made in the 80s, but I don't think that's where we're going with this youthful optimism movie. So, um, possibly some urban settings, or maybe this is going to take place at like something like Woodstock, like one of those big concert venues that's just out in the open somewhere. All right, I think Woodstock sounds like fun. Okay. Woodstock or something like Woodstock. It's the sister concert, Snoopy. Um, okay, so let's go with Woodstock. I think we like that one. I think that one's a keeper. All right, so we got a youthful counterculture movie that's set in Woodstock, and let the comedy of errors ensue. So let's dig a little bit more into what our conflict or problem is then. So, all right, we've got a director who wants to make the perfect movie. See, you guys have already started to give me the essence of the conflict with the character choices you made here, which is pretty good. Normally I get a bunch of disconnected bits and then we have to stitch it together, but you've kind of already started to build this scenario. But so we have a bunch of ingredients here, though. We need to decide which of these is like forefront and which other bits are complications. So, for instance, we could think of like, who is our protagonist here? If we know we have a director, a lead actor, an aging comeback queen, we've got a producer who's trying to rein in the director. So we might think about like, whose story is this? Which of these characters is our protagonist, and which of the others are people in the lives of the protagonist? Which doesn't mean that we can't give equal airtime to each of them. It just gives us a little bit of, we could have a switch. All right, let's go with our director. So director trying to make the movie. In which case, all of these other characters are, in that sense, kind of obstacles or complications. Because when you're constructing a plot, this is where a lot of time you're mostly talking about obstacles and complications. Character wants something, and everything else in the story is a barrier to them getting it or accomplishing it. And that's where story happens, right? It comes from that clash between the thing the character wants to do to move forward and all the things that keep them from moving forward in the direction they want to. And I think that's enough, because at this point we can now sort of move into constructing our story. So there's a very simple structure one can use, and I'm going to go with this template that says page 1, page 2, page 3. If we decide we want to expand any of these into more than one page, we can. But in terms of basic story structure, there's a kind of a universal one that, you stop me if you've heard this before, but most of us have encountered this structure from the very first time anyone ever read us a bedtime story, right? You start with once upon a time, and there was a so-and-so, and they had this problem, and then they launch into trying to solve the problem. That gets you into the middle of the story. And the middle is usually just basically all the attempts that they make to achieve their goal or solve their problem, but not quite succeeding yet, or possibly having complications that get in the way, or they have setbacks, or they get lost along the way, or whatever happens. And then the ending, which is basically it resolves itself somehow, and it's either a happy ending or a sad ending or something kind of in between or ambivalent. So another way to look at this is basically setup, complications, resolution. So the middle is where you get all the complications, coming to a boil, and the resolution is how it ends, however that ends up, however it resolves itself. So if we look at that in terms of this story, that kind of lends us pretty easily into figuring out what needs to be in each section. So for example, in the setup, we establish movie set. That's kind of the first thing we have to start with. We establish that we are on a movie set and what type of movie it is. Okay, so director looking for actors and movie is struggling with a script. Okay, so that's interesting, because that was actually a different place I was picturing in the beginning. And it's not necessarily wrong. But that's an interesting question. Do we want our story to take place on the movie set, or do we want it to take place before the movie gets made? Now, my personal feeling is that I think a movie set is the most ridiculous, chaotic place. to set a story, because you've got so many people running around, with headsets, people running around with makeup, people running around with lights. And you can create a lot of chaos very easily in that setting because it's already chaotic. Whereas I tend to think that when you have a director looking for actors, it's mostly a bunch of people having lunch and saying, well, what if we got that actor? Or would you like to be in our movie? Yeah, I kind of would love to see this take place on the movie set when the actors and the script are already there, which doesn't mean they couldn't be making revisions to the script on the fly, because that does happen a lot with movies, like, you know, or especially if you've got, like, say, a busybody producer, or you've got a really hyper perfectionistic director who's constantly trying to make changes. This is actually where you get a lot of the horror stories that sometimes happen in Hollywood, where, like, oh my God, that film set was a mess. They had no idea what they were doing. We were getting rewrites to the script every day. In fact, one of my favorite bad movies of my childhood that I still love, which was Disney's The Black Hole, I later on discovered they started filming and they had no script. They never had a screenplay from beginning to the end, and you can kind of tell. So, um, so yeah, we could have, like, we start on the movie set type of movie, and then we start on a note of general chaos, just to set the tone. So then this is where we get into all of these things that we were talking about here. So we have an old lady who's complaining about the youngs. We have a producer trying to rein in the director. Um, oh, hey, that could be good. So yes, main lead is gone. Now this could be interesting because we have, you were going to have the lead be this sort of like veteran actor making a comeback who's on the set here, and you're going to have, sorry, the lead be their grandchild or their child. So if that's the case, what if the grandchild is getting drafted into being the lead literally in this scene? It's like, well, my by the way, what are we talking about here? Are we, you know what? We said this is an old lady. So who's the lead actor here? Is it their granddaughter, their grandson? I mean, we don't have to be, you know, gender binary here if we don't want to, but although it's the 80s, so Hollywood is not going to be as free with the terminology that we have, but let's just look at it anyway. The son, okay, so this is the old lady, um, recommends her son. Oh, my son can do it. Which has got to be just the most bananas casting choice. Like, you know, my son is here. They can act in the film. No audition process at all. That, my God, that would be a really chaotic set. All right. And somewhere in the middle of we've got these other elements of chaos too. We've got the producer. I should say, trying to rein in the director. So that could be something as simple as the producer voicing what we might be thinking, which is like, you can't just draft someone who happens to be on set, you know, and the director saying, no, I'm going to do it. We're on a tight schedule. And besides, I see something in this actor. He's like a young me. So yeah, we're going to cast him. Exactly. That's a really good setup. I like that. And it gives us a bunch of different characters. Um, and I also think uh, let's not call her the old lady now that we've established that she's a veteran. Veteran, actually, comeback queen. I like the term comeback queen. The comeback queen is a handful. Can we agree on that? Because I think I think it's more fun if she's a handful in a number of different ways. Little bit of the diva thing going on there. Constantly talking about when I was on the set with Brando, uh, that's not how we did things. I think she should be constantly name dropping. Don't you agree? Hmm. Producer could represent the director's logic, yeah. But you guys are saying the director is trying to rein, the producer is trying to rein in the director. So I think the producer should just be the person constantly acting as like the Jiminy Cricket to the director, saying, "Oh my God, what are you doing now?" I think because anytime you have a character who's a little bit out of control, you have to have that character who's kind of like the opposite or the counterbalance, or they're kind of like the conscience character that doesn't get listened to. So I think it should be more like the producer should be the director's conscience. I don't know. Does that make sense to you guys? I'm just thinking in terms of like what's going to give us the most dramatic chaos or comedic chaos here. And then complications. So what else can go wrong? Oh, okay, cool. Um, what else can go wrong coming straight off of this? My son can do it, which is kind of like our inciting incident from which all the other chaos happens. Then, so first of all, can the son even act? Because I think it'd actually be funnier if the son can't act worth a damn. What do you think? I mean, that's much better than the comeback queen having a grandson. Sorry, this was supposed to be grandson, isn't it? Not son. I think it's more fun if the grandson can't act. Don't you agree? Or has never acted, you know? Can't act, no experience. Because you said he was a newbie, so let's make him the most newbie-ish newbie he could possibly be. Um, and then, hmm, what else can go wrong? Something was supposed to be delivered to the set that's not here. You know, some kind of props didn't arrive, and so they have to improvise. Oh, there we go. Yes, yes. He's an anxious grandson. Now this is your chance to follow in the family tradition. The reason I'm thinking of the props didn't arrive is I'm remembering an experience I had, my one experience in the theater back in my 20s at university, where there was a prop that disappeared from the prop table. And at the last minute, one of the actors had to go out on stage and basically talk into their hand because they didn't have a phone. And I'm just picturing all the different ways that an actor could have to pick up some random object, pretend it's something else, while already not being good at acting. Um, what else could go wrong? I mean, there's a lot of things. Mechanical problems. Um, oh, with, let's see, stage, lights, and I have a punchline for whatever else we do here. I think the punchline should be, he gives a brilliant performance, and there's no film in the camera. Oh, hey, there we go. Go get something from the florist shop. And you know what? And you know what could be fun about that is the florist gives him a magical flower. Are you guys familiar with Dumbo's feather? At one point in Dumbo is given like a magical feather, quote unquote, that supposedly helps him to fly. This could actually be a really magical flower. Imagine he's given the magical flower and suddenly he can act. It's a charisma. It's a charisma flower. Yeah, I think there's actually already enough chaos going on in this set that possibly the florist, because they're a, maybe it's, yeah, a magic flower. Let's put that in quotes. Maybe it's not magical at all. But maybe this florist isn't even magical. Yes, exactly. It's like, I'm so nervous. I don't know what to do. And the florist says, here, I'm going to give you a magical flower. It will make you brilliant. And then he goes out on stage and he's brilliant. Oops, where's my, no. Grandson now gives, oops, brilliant, but unfortunately, there's no film in the camera. Oh yes, we can add an extra note, like, what about the producer? Oh, one of the characters, yeah. How's that? Florist? We don't have a florist. Short and sweet. Go get a prop from, so instead of sending them to the florist shop, go get a prop from down the hall. He goes down the hall and he finds a florist shop. So he figures, I guess this is where I'm supposed to go. Go get the thingy from the props department. Where is that? It's down the hall. Goes down the hall. Instead of finding the props department, he finds a florist shop and goes, hi there, I'm looking for props. Oh, yeah, sure, I can help you. Really? Okay. Yeah, I don't even know what I'm doing, and my grandmother really wants me to do this, and I don't know how to act. I'm gonna fail. And whoa, hold it, buddy, hold it, buddy. You're gonna be fine. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give you a magic flower. It'll make you brilliant. Really? Do you really think so? Honestly, I think it's in you. You just need a little help. This magic flower will help you. Yada yada yada. Yeah. So I think we have a plot. That that came together very organically. Interesting. Okay. So let me look at the time here. Oh, we got lots of time. This is going to be great. Okay. So now here's where we can maybe think about if we were going to break this down into some pages. This is normally the point in my process where I start thinking about how much space is each of these things going to need. So since we're giving ourselves more than 3 pages to do stuff, I am thinking I want to make this 2 pages. And the reason I want to do that is because then page 1 is set up movie set, and page 2 is the recasting. It's the realization that our main lead is gone. By the way, what happened to the main lead? I feel like there's could be something funny here. Why is the main lead gone? I don't think it should be as simple as they quit. That's too boring. Let's come up with, like, were they in an accident? If so, let's come up with the most ridiculous accident they could possibly be in. If they've got personal problems, let's come up with the most ridiculous personal problems they could have. What could be the reason why the main lead is gone? I want to know. Inquiring minds want to know. Oh no, they had an allergic reaction to the flower props. The main lead got lost in the castle. But do the rest of these guys know about the castle? If the castle is part of the magical florist shop, I don't know if they should know about it. I think we should come up with something that's non-magical and mundane. They don't know what happened to them. Oh, come on, but then if we don't know, then it's almost like we're going to be expecting to find out in the rest of the story. I don't think the main lead is important enough to the story to have a mystery attached to why they're gone. Oh, because that would almost be like creating an entirely other plot. I think if we want to be able to do this in 6 pages, we can keep it simple. What's a throwaway line? Okay, you guys are really set on this. All right. How are we, the audience, going to find out, though? Because this is the thing. When you're telling a story, you also want to think about how's the audience going to find out. Are we just going to sort of see this main lead tied up in the back of the florist shop while the florist is talking to this actor? Because if so, I don't know how we're going to know who that is. See, I was really hoping it would just be something like got injured snowboarding while unicycling. It was a unicycling accident or something. Stuck in LA traffic. I want to take that one step further. Let's say they were stuck in LA traffic for 3 weeks. That's right. Oh, we had the same idea, Belen. Yeah, let's go farther. I like 3 weeks. They're just gone. Yeah, they went into LA traffic. They didn't come out. I'm finally here. I do like that, actually. I want to give this guy a name too. What is that, like? What's a good name for this actor? What's a real leading actor name? I want to give, like, we might as well start giving these people names. Okay, I don't know what the first name is, but I feel like I want to name this guy Swell Guy because he's just a swell guy. Mike Swell Guy? Not again in the LA traffic. Oh no. And so at the end, it's like, it's me, Mike Swell Guy. I finally made it. There we go. John Swell Guy? Hmm. Hmm. I feel like Mike Swell Guy has more of a phonetic rhythm to it. We could have a John down here somewhere though. John, how about John is the grandson? Yeah. Although I could actually see if it was Johnny Swell Guy. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna make this guy Mike. Mike, and this will be Johnny Swell Guy. How about that? Does everybody like that? There you go. And I don't know why, but I feel like I want to give this director like a slightly a slightly edgy and cool, but maybe slightly pretentious name too. Like and not a full name, just maybe a first name every. I want to call this guy Duke. I don't know, maybe I'm just channeling Doonesbury right now, but I just feel like I want to call this director Duke. Is that okay? Duke, you're crazy. You can't do that. Duke, you've gone too far. And then the producer can be I keep moving names around now because now I feel like I want the producer to be Mike. I don't know. I just feel like Mike's a good name for a producer that he's worked with for years, but he's constantly saying, "Oh my God, what are you doing now?" Mike, the producer. And then let's see, the comeback queen. We have to give her a sufficiently diva-ish sounding name. What? It's a good name for a 60s diva actor. It's got to have something. Yes, Sophie. I think so. If it's going to be Sophie, it should be Sophia. Sophia or Audrey are both good. Like, 'cause it reminds me of Sophia Loren. Um, Sophia does something or other. Oh no, can it be Karen? Oh, I'm torn. I'm really torn there because on one hand that's fun, but on the other hand, it doesn't quite feel like a lavish enough name. That Karen was a very common name for my generation growing up in the 70s. I'm not sure if it was, well, I think it was still in use in the 60s. I like Sophie or Audrey, but I like Sophia a little better than Audrey because it has one extra syllable. So can we come up with like a 3 syllable last name for Sophia something? Sophia Immaculatus. Sophia Delacroix. Oh, I like that. Delacroix. Yes. She's her name sounds French, but she's not. But it would be fun if she keeps trying to sound French. So it's not actually a real French accent. It's just like it's a fake French accent. It's the sound of like an American in Hollywood trying very hard to sound French without actually knowing a word of French. Oh, you are so very, very talented, my grandson. You are Delacroix. Everyone in the family is is Hollywood royalty. I think she should be constantly saying, "How do you say?" in spite of the fact that she speaks perfectly English. You can be, how do you say, carrying on the tradition. That's how you fake being a foreigner, is you just keep saying, "How do you say?" Yes, exactly. She's been in so many French art films, so many, and no one has seen them. That's why she can get away with saying how many she's been in. Um, now I feel like I now I feel like I have to give the son, uh, uh, the grandson, take his mother's last name as a stage name. They do not deserve to be a Delacroix. Oh no! But I feel like I want to give him a vaguely French name now, which is why I'm going to call him Philippe. Oh, Philippe, you are finally a Delacroix. Or Jean. Wait, oh, wait for the comeback queen or for the grandson. Every time she says the amount of film, she has an extra film. Oh no, that's right. For the grandson. How about this? Hyphenated. Jean Philippe. Jean Philippe. Oh, Jean Philippe. So now you are finally following in the tradition. I like Jean Philippe because I don't think anyone in real life actually has that name. I don't think I've ever seen those two names put together as a name, which makes I which makes it sound sufficiently fictitious, fictitiously pretentious. Because again, these are not people who speak a word of French. These are people who are pretending to be French. So that's why I like it. Um, that's right. Okay, so we have Jean Philippe who is filling in for Johnny Swell Guy. And okay, so we got all these characters' names. We got Johnny Swell Guy is lost stuck in traffic. Duke's got to make do with Sophia Delacroix. Oh yes, mixing up Sophia Delacroix and Mike the producer is trying to rein in director Duke. And and I don't think the florist should ever have a name. I think it should always be like, I don't know, I got this from the florist over there. What florist? You know, they never give a name. They're just because they're just there to be a magical instrument of plot. Okay, cool. Oh, we like yeah, I don't think we give the florist and we can have a I'm sorry, we're talking about a general neutral florist. That really works if especially if we don't give the florist a name. The florist can be everything and everyone, you know. You're a magical florist. You don't have to conform to anything, even if it is the 60s. All right. So now you are the flora. I am the florist. Uh-huh. So now we can kind of get into thinking about um, okay, we actually have our page count here. So let's take another look here at the page count of the rest of the, the dynamic here. So we have a couple of different things we need to see. And this is usually how I break down plot is I think about what are the major twists or turns to the plot. So obviously the first one would be um, trying out Jean Philippe um, can't act. And that, I think that would just be a sequence of like, cut, let's try it again. Cut, let's try it again from the top. And then sent to get a prop. And we have the florist. Yeah, you know what? I feel like you're right. I think that this has shifted a little bit. I think our young would-be actor really is the main character here because they're the one that's been put in the awkward position of having to act and having all this anxiety and having a solution produced for them. So yeah, I don't think our director is the main character. I think our I think our director is the pot stirrer that puts between the director and our diva are the ones putting the grandson in this awful position. But I think the grandson is our protagonist, our hapless protagonist. Hapless protagonists are fun. No, it's hard not to feel bad for a character who's kind of hapless and has just been thrown into something. Returns. All right. So if I was going to break this into like this page two into really three pages, this is how I'd look at it. Like one would be about how Jean-Philippe can't act, and then it would be sent to get a prop, florist, anxious, and then sent back, take it from the top. And then we have the last page where the grandson is brilliant, and they're like, cut, that's a wrap. That's brilliant. And I owe it all to this magic flower I got from the florist. Florist? We don't have a florist. Hey, everybody, it's me, Johnny Swell Guy. I'm here. And that's basically your last page. What do you think? Does that all make sense to you guys? We like that? Cool. All right. So at this point now, we can kind of move on to looking at creating a bit of a layout here. So now this is the point where I would sort of look at, okay, so this is in many ways a looser script that I would normally go with. Just so you know, in comics, there's a handful of traditions of how stories get written down. There's the full script format where you actually have something that's a lot more like a film or TV script or a stage play where it breaks down. This happens and this dialogue happens and then this movement happens and this dialogue happens. And then there's also what's known as the plot script, which is what was used by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby back in the day, where one of them would write down a rough description of what happens per page. Well, or at least this is allegedly what happened. There's a lot of historians who now dispute how much Stan actually did. But if we go with the top story that this is how plot script works, then usually you just get a paragraph that describes what happens on each page, which is a lot closer to what we've got going on here, albeit in a little bit of a scribbly point form way. So all right, so we know that this starts with the movie set. We know that what's going to happen here is we're going to have one page to sort of set up the movie set and then the recasting. So this is going to be our beginning, and this is going to be, let me just use a different color. This is going to be our middle, and this is going to be our resolution. So, okay, if I was going to start figuring out the layout of this, so generally speaking, anytime I am setting up a scene, I usually want to make sure that somewhere in there I have an establishing shot. Establishing shots have a tendency to be bigger because they have to hold a lot more. So the first thing I think I got to ask myself here is, what's my opening establishing shot? Is it the sound stage? By the way, did we even establish, are these guys filming on location or a sound stage? What do you think? It's Woodstock, but most, so that might suggest we're out in the open. Um, oh, a question here. Can be cut. Sorry, you're gonna have to elaborate on that. But my first question is, like, are we filming out in the open Woodstock, or are there going to be certain scenes that are filmed in a sound stage? Because they often are on a movie set, you know. But I feel like if we're filming Woodstock and we really want to capture, like, the director is like, I want to capture the essence, the vibe of Woodstock. I want to capture the unbridled optimism of the era. I want to blah, 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 all of that good stuff. Then probably he is filming out in the great outdoors. So that tells me something, because if it was a soundstage, I might almost feel you're obliged to use two establishing shots, one of the lot outside that says film so and so studios, and then you cut to the indoors. But if we're filming on location, we can skip that question and just have, I think, one big shot that establishes a bunch of things. So the first thing I'm probably going to do is maybe, set up some kind of circular pattern to a bunch of things. What would be on this film set? I'm not even sure. If I was doing this for real, I'd probably do a bunch of research, but since I'm doing this quickly for a workshop, I'm not going to do any research, and I'm just going to make a bunch of really bananas assumptions, like maybe there's a crane and there's probably some boom mics, right? And probably, let's see, if it's meant to be Woodstock, then probably there's some kind of stand with a lot of extras in it. Maybe I'll build another. I mean, Woodstock wasn't in an auditorium, but I'm assuming that they had some kind of makeshift stands wherever they were, and there's going to be lots of people milling around. So just do some freehand perspective here of just a crowd of people and another crowd of people. And somewhere in the middle here, we've got a stage. And yeah, we haven't even thought about what's the story of this film. But I like, who is, let's just double track back here because I want to know this. Who is the main character playing in this film? Because if it's the story about Woodstock, is it? Oh no, that's fun. It's very cool. We don't have a lead there. What do you mean? Where's our lead? He's stuck in traffic. He's been stuck in traffic for 3 weeks. Yeah, I don't think we're getting him back. What do you want to do? So that can be fun. Um, who's the main character playing in this movie? So there's two ways I think we could go with this Woodstock movie. See, this is what's fun about this whole story you guys have cooked up here, because there's a story within the story. So both plots we have to come up with stuff. Um, so is the Woodstock movie about the people going to Woodstock, or is it about one of the bands that are performing at Woodstock? Because those are two different movies, right? My thought is that if this director is trying to perfectly encapsulate the era, he wants to do the movie about the young people who are at the concert. And it's about their personal dramas, and it's about coming of age, and it's about the optimism, and it's about a bunch of nonsense. Also, if we want to make this director a guy who's talking a bunch of nonsense, we should make his film as unrelatable as possible to the audience reading the story. So I kind of like the idea that it's not about one of the bands, because that's a formula of movie that we've seen 1,000 times before, right? It's more about the young people who are at this concert, and the concert is just the backdrop for their generational drama, which means we're gonna like have a couple of standout characters here on the set. And let's see, let me just zoom in a bit here. I'm going to get some kind of a director in his chair with a megaphone. And he's yelling something like, "All right, places, people." And then we get a little bit of a snippet of the actual movie, which means I feel like I'm going with a wide shot here of two characters. And let's just give this character really hippie-ish hair. I feel like I just drew myself. But anyway, and they're talking some kind of like dialogue that's probably more about conveying the drama of the piece. Oh, wait. Concert goer who with his friends from high school run away from their parents' place of completely idyllic 1960s coming of age experience where he meets this pretty college age girl and have a whirlwind romance with Woodstock as the backdrop. Brilliant. I love it. All right. Let's give her some kind of what's a really 60s hairdo? I mean, I guess the most 60s hairdo you could have would be a beehive. Now she just looks like Marge Simpson, but I'm going with it. Okay. Um, and I think so. So I think we can establish that maybe on the next page. So here we're just establishing the movie. So it should be something like, "Oh, Jeff." I'm gonna give him a perfectly ordinary, mundane name. "Oh, Jeff, it is so great that we can be in this time, in this place, with and so much optimism and idealism, and all of these our dreams are manifest in this concert." And Jeff is like, "Yeah, babe, it's cool." Because Jeff is not a deep guy at all. He's like, "Yeah, babe, it's cool. Can you get me another one of those, whatever it is, people are taking at this concert?" And then the director's like, "Cut! No, Jeff, I need you to give me the unbridled optimism, the unbridled idealism of the era." Give this director a drink. What kind of hat does a director wear? He's just wearing a baseball cap. Oh, a beret would be good too. I do like the idea of a beret. Whoops. And a goatee and sunglasses. Here you go. And a Hawaiian shirt, which I'm not going to draw, but anyway. So we get a critique in here, and we get some attitude from the actor, which would be like, hey man, it's not my fault that you haven't given me my motivation. What is I feel like I need to know for this next bit here. What is our comeback queen? Wait, did we give her a name? Where did her name go? I feel like some of the stuff I wrote somehow disappeared. Oh no, there it is. Madame Delacroix. What is she playing in this movie? Because she's playing, this is a film from her more youthful years, and she's 60. What is a 60-year-old doing at 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 Woodstock? What is she playing at Woodstock? I only just thought of that. She's got to be playing something at this concert. Is she playing man, this is hard because Woodstock was all about young people being obnoxiously idealistic. Well, not always obnoxiously, but you know what I mean. Um, what is she playing in this movie? She needs to be on the set. Unless she's actually playing a younger version of herself. But she's the woman who is young in heart. She's very optimistic. Okay, so her comeback is that she's playing a character much younger than herself, because that's the director's vision. The director wants the actress who was in those films in the 60s, and he doesn't care about the ageism of the casting. It's like, no, I want Sophia Delacroix to be playing the cool grandma of a guy who's attending Woodstock and insist on going with that guy, very comedic role. That's the other possibility. Yeah. Um, I don't know, which idea do we like better? I mean, actually, I kind of like the idea that she's been like sort of eccentrically cast here, because then that could be another thing the producer is like harping on at our director about. And I don't understand the casting here, Duke. Lay off me, Mike. You don't understand my vision. Put her in a mini skirt. And she'll be going on about with when I was in all those French films. And then I think I'm going to put Mike, the producer, in the baseball cap. Or maybe Mike should just be a guy in a suit. I think I kind of like that. Mike's the only one wearing a suit. And it's like, Duke, I don't understand your casting here. And Mike and Duke is like, lay off, Mike. You don't understand my vision. I'm trying to capture the optimism of the era. And Sophia Delacroix embodies that optimism. Therefore, she is the perfect starlet to realize my vision. Here we go. So there we go. That sets up our scenario. And just for a little bit of continuity, I'm going to use the same composition. Every time I draw this guy in the beanie, I feel like I want to hear like some kind of like jazz beat in the background. Like he's going to start doing some beat poetry. Um, so there we go. No, this is where we're going to have the mention of the no lead actor. We have basically like, anyway, if you don't, anyway, you don't have a film because you have no lead actor. Where is my lead actor? He's still stuck in traffic. He's been stuck in traffic for 3 weeks. Well, that's LA for you. Boom, jing. And then from off panel, we have, oh, I have a grandson here who would be perfect. Can he act? Can he act? Of course, he's a Delacroix. Oh, Jean Philippe, come here. This is your big chance. He should look like the most slumped over, unhappy guy. And he'd be like, Grandma, I don't even want to be an actor. Pish posh. You'll do as you say. You'll do as I say. You're a Delacroix. Now is the time to show your mettle. And then, wait, what did we have up here in the notes here? The recasting. And the director can be like talking about something else with Mike, the guy in the suit. Other production problems like what else did we say was wrong? Props didn't arrive, mechanical problems. Yada yada yada. And then I'm gonna give this guy just like weird alfalfa hair. Action. He doesn't know the lines, so someone has to feed it to him. And he gives the worst delivery of this line ever. Now, you might wonder how I'm making some of these choices and as I do it. And some of this is very visceral after just years of doing comic book storytelling. I usually just have a visceral feeling about how much space on the page each thing needs for pacing. And that's one of those things that just comes with practice. Um, so even without quite knowing what's happening, I can sort of just improvise some pacing here. And then it'd be like, Mike would be like, see, you can't use him. He's terrible. Mike, you're really harshing my buzz here. You know? And then an AD in a headset comes out and says, why don't you go to props and get your yourself sorted out? And he's like, okay. And we've got some other people running around yelling different things about stuff that hasn't arrived or has arrived or that's still going awry. So we can get the sense that this set is still completely in chaos and no one has a clue what they're supposed to be doing, you know. And then we see this poor guy going down a long hallway, trying to figure out where he's going. He winds up somewhere, little kiosk with I got to figure out what this florist looks like. For some reason, I want them to just have ridiculous clown hair. Um, and they're like, hi, is this props? No, it's the florist, but come on in. I guess that'll do. I'll just slouch my way in here because that's how I go through life. And then we have some kind of really expensive magical castle full of plants and flowers. And he's like, wow, I had no idea this was back here. Oh, yes, it's amazing what you find in the oddest places when you're not looking. And then he's like, well, it doesn't matter because I can't really act anyway. And this is just my grandmother that wants this, you know. And the florist could be like, I have just the thing for you. Look, it's a magical flower. And you'd be like, gee, thanks, weird lady. I hope it will help. And then we're back on set again. Lots of people. And stands. And there's our director in his little chair. His megaphone. And action. Oops. Notice how, by the way, I'm keeping this really loose. This is what I call, what do I call this? Manic bananas thumbnailing. So you'll see the term thumbnails referred to a lot by artists when they talk about the really rough drawings that you do before you do the actual drawing. So what I'm really doing here is planning what the pages will look like. This is not necessarily finished work or anything resembling it, but I don't want to do finished work yet. I want to know what the page is like. I want to know how it flows. I want to know how it's breaking down. And most of all, I want to have room to undo and or redo the work. And if I go down the rabbit hole of trying to do perfect finished work before I know whether the page layout even works, then I'm going to get a little too married to it. I may not give myself the freedom to make changes because there's a lot of stuff here I might go back and change. I might change the composition of any one of these panels. I might change the size and relative relationships of the panels across the page. I may rearrange some of these panel arrangements. I might decide this one wants to be a wide panel, and then this one underneath will be a row of 3 panels. You know, I can make a lot of different decisions about every one of these page layouts. But right now, I'm just sort of like going through a rough visualization exercise. So I have the freedom to change any of the decisions I've made here because I did it really loose. Because this is really just me thinking with a pen. Um, so now we're at the last page here, and let's see. So now my thinking is we have one panel of total trepidation where he's like, and then he opens his mouth. And what comes out is acting brilliance. And then we have like a moment for everyone to react to that. And then that's like, cut, brilliant. And it's like, I take it back, Duke. He's like magic. Oh, my grandson, you truly are a Delacroix. And then somewhere offset, hey, it's me, Johnny Swell Guy. And then someone over here going, florist? We don't have a florist. Anyway, that is so super rough, that last panel there. You'll notice that I just completely got lazy and didn't even try blocking in the environment because I was just trying to see like how many events can actually happen in this one panel. Which I will sometimes do. I'll like sometimes go, let's just get the pacing down first and we'll figure out how the layout works. So this is one example of how I might, block out a story in terms of layout, just to answer the basic questions like, okay, where does one page end? Where does it begin? How many panels is it going to be? What happens in each panel? And note that every panel has anywhere between 1 and 1,000 possible events that could, well, probably not 1,000, that could happen inside the panel. Also, one of the things I will sometimes give note to or thought to is which events are going to open the panel, which ones are going to close the panel. So does the panel start with character A saying this and character B saying this, or does character B saying this be the start of the next panel, you know? And some of these are just instinctive choices that I make after years of doing this. But there are also a lot of logical reasons that you can give for that. And this is the kind of thing I often cover in my visual storytelling course, which is one of the courses I teach for sequential arts at MTM. You know, it's the business of like, how does timing work? How does setups and punchlines work? How does compression work? Like, how much time am I trying to fit into a single panel versus trying to have one event that takes up a whole panel? And then we get into other questions like, how does the eye flow work? How cluttered is the page getting? Are any of these pages getting too crowded? Do some of these events want to go into another page that isn't as quite as crowded? And those are the kinds of things that I might ask myself either at the thumbnailing stage or the scripting stage. Because if I'm doing full script, which we're not doing here, then I might have already figured out the panel to panel flow at the stage where I was writing it, and I don't have to figure as much of that out at the thumbnailing stage, as opposed to a plot script where you were literally figuring out the script for these events while you're thumbnailing. But I don't know, does anybody have any thoughts or questions about any of that? I mean, I could fuss with these layouts some more. I could certainly do that, and I could certainly reconsider a lot of choices I made here. But I'm actually more interested in getting other people's thoughts or input here. What do you think? Also, do I need to zoom in? How small is this on your screen? You guys were so chatty before, and now you've gone completely silent. Let me know you're still here. Send up a flare. Looks really good so far. Okay. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. And there's a lot of different ways we could break down the scene with the florist. Like I could have, for instance, added in more panels. And I'll be honest, some of that may just have been that I was getting tired because that's Saturday, right? Part of my brain is going, when do we get to stop drawing? What would the recap for this session be? First, start with questions like, yeah, I think that's about right. Well, I mean, because what we've done here is a complete story process, or at least what I tend to think of as everything that comes before doing the actual art. Because again, these are rough thumbnails, and if I was doing this for real as a story, my finished pages might end up looking nothing like this by the time they've evolved a little bit. I've played with it. And also, if we expanded a little bit on the dynamic of this scene with the florist, there could be a lot of extra panels that might come in as a result of that interaction, depending on what he says to the florist and what the florist says back to him in that exchange, right? And then, oh, yeah, we have a record of this lesson. Well, you know what? If admissions or marketing has your emails, I could always send you guys a copy of everything that I just put on this Jamboard. If you want that record, I can happily pass that along to you. I've done that with other workshops. As long as they have your email, which I assume they do, or you couldn't have been invited to this event. So yeah, I'll make a note of that. Actually, if you guys want to just plop your emails into the chat, I can do that this afternoon once I get the transcript. Because this is being recorded, and so I will get a transcript of what was in the chat. So if you drop your emails in there right now, then yeah, I can make some kind of export out of this and send it along. Doop to doop to do. Cool. Um, yeah, so obviously this is a very rough version of the process that I might use to do a story, because again, I don't normally work this way. This is the way I work in workshops. I'm one of those people that loves a fully detailed script before I even start drawing, because then that cuts down the amount of thinking I need to do while I'm moving my pen. Um, so normally I would already know how many panels were going on the page, and I would already know what dialogue was going in each panel, because that's my process. Someone else might work differently though, and there are some people who actually never type up a story, who are people who use the thumbnail script method, where they're literally writing and doodling at the same time, which is kind of what you saw me do here. Like, I was kind of coming up with a script based on a loose plot while I was doodling it. That's basically the thumbnail script method. So really what I just gave you guys was a thumbnail script minus the actual writing, because the marker tool I'm using virtually here isn't that great for tiny type. I could have used the type tool, but I didn't want to slow down the workshop. But if I was doing this for real, then probably there would be a longer process where I would hammer out the specific dialogue. And that at that point, I might have different choices I would make in terms of how I would chop this up into panels. But yeah, I don't know. Does anybody have, because we got like about 10 minutes left to the workshop, does anybody have any follow-up questions in terms of the process of making a comic, just based on what we did here? Or just additional questions about the school if you've suddenly thought of them. Those are, everything's fair game. By the way, I love that you guys are already talking about trading fanfic at each other with each other. See, community. That's what it's all about. People finding their tribe of fellow creative weirdos. How do you decide the size of the panels? That's an interesting question. So usually it comes down to a couple of things. Number one, how much visual information do I need in the panel? Because if the visual information going into that panel is less, there's a good chance I can get away with having the panel be smaller. You'll note that every single time I've tried to show the set in any kind of comprehensive or sweeping way, I usually went for a bigger panel. Or alternately, if it's a panel that has a lot of dialogue in it, then I might also have to make the panel a little bigger to accommodate the words, because words take up space as well. And usually my goal is to try to avoid the panel looking crowded, because the worst thing in the world to a comic book artist is, whoops, I have my tablet sideways in my lap there. The worst thing in the world is a panel that looks like this. And then you come in and you do, whoops, hold on. I think I changed the tip of the marker. No, it's actually just a different thing. You come in and you do the lettering, and it actually looks more like that, right? So, there's a little bit of a math logic to size of panels, because it comes down to what is going to fit, and also sometimes there's a question of shape too. Like, certain panels might lend themselves better to a tall composition rather than a horizontal composition. Um, Sometimes there's a certain fun in having a wide panel where the object of focus is off to one side and the dialogue is off to the other side. That can be fun too when you've got characters yelling to each other across a large space, which is what you have on a film set, which is why I have a few panels that are composed like this. Um, but also, there's a certain energy that different panels have. Like, I feel like wide panels feel somehow slower sometimes, Narrower panels feel faster. There's a reason for that that has to do with how we read and how the surface area our eye is traveling across feels like the passage of time to us. Also, sometimes I might go a little taller with a panel. I want to emphasize it, although I don't think I did that here. Um, so yeah, it's the size and the shape of the panel has a direct relationship to the contents. And there's a whole host of different ingredients that go into my thinking in terms of how I choose that. Um, but mostly it boils down to what's the information or what's the impact of the panel meant to be, or what's the flow, or what's the vibe. And in a story, the vibe is going to be flexible, right? Like different moments have different feelings to them. So I'm constantly trying to adjust what I'm doing to match the feeling of what's happening at that exact moment in the story, if that makes sense as an answer. These are all good questions, by the way. You guys have been a great group. I want to make sure I don't forget to mention that because you're also asking a lot of really good questions, which is good. It shows me that you're engaged with the topic. Actually, this here's a question I have for you. How many people here want to do comics versus just being interested in the topic? Because I'm going to go on a limb and say that anybody that comes to a workshop on comics has at least a passing interest in it, whether or not they want to do it as the main thing, or whether your main thing, because your main thing might be animation, it might be concept. I don't know. Maybe you're just coming to a free workshop because you're like, hey, it's a free workshop. But if anyone is interested in comics, then obviously that's gonna color the type of questions you're gonna ask. There you go. And it's actually not unusual for people to have crossovers between topics, because again, you know, creativity is creativity, right? Um, and once people are in the school, again, people who from different programs, they end up having lunch together. They end up doing fun things together. Once every year, Kent and I try to have a kind of event that everyone can come to, which is called the 24-hour comic, which is this crazy exercise where you get a bunch of people in a room together, and each one of them is trying to make a 20-page comic in 24 hours. And we usually get not just people from our program that come out for that, but people from all the programs because, everybody's like, hey, cool, I'm going to make a comic. That sounds crazy. So there you go. But yeah, I hope this was at least entertaining as well as educational here. And by the way, this was a fun plot. I really liked how this came together. Again, compared to some of the groups I've done, and granted, some of the workshops I've done online have also been for high school students who tend to have an even more, let's just say, even more bananas approach to the workshop. Whereas you guys actually came in with like a premise from the get-go, like your characters were already adding up to a premise. So that was a lot of fun. And there you go. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah. So I guess this is the point where I should be wrapping things up because I can see we're getting to 3, and I know you guys probably have other places to be today. But I've got your emails, and I will definitely send you all out a copy of this. Um, and as we were saying before, if you guys have any additional questions you think of that weren't answered in the open house, do feel free to get a hold of admissions. Azadi should be able to help you with any questions you have there. And hopefully this gave you guys at least a bit of a taste of not the whole taste because every one of our teachers is different, but a little bit of a taste of how we do things at MTM. And yeah, Oh, when is the open house? So if you're talking about the in-person open house, we do have, if you are able to get to the Toronto area, our next one is, I believe, let me just check my calendar so I'm getting the date right. I believe it's on the November the 30th. We have an in-person one. Just double check that that's not like a Wednesday or something. No, it's the 30th. So 2 weeks from today, we're having an in-person open house at the school, and you're always welcome to come to more than one of them, because that's, of course, the one where you can actually walk around the school and inspect the premises and actually shake our hands in person if you want to. Um, so if that's something you're interested in signing up for, again, feel free to get in touch with admissions about that. They'll pass that information along. Yeah, I can't really think of anything else to say or ask here. That's basically my shtick. That's my song and dance. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Um, and yeah, feel free to come out to any other events we have if you're nearby and you're able. Cool, cool, cool. This was a lot of fun, guys. Thanks for livening up my Saturday with this. Johnny, swell guy. um, and yeah, otherwise, this is more or less the point where I release you back to your regular lives and have fun with the rest of your weekend. Whoops. Ugh. All right. Take care, everybody. And yeah, I will, once I collect those emails out of there, I will send a copy of that along to you. All right. Take it easy, folks.